How does one respond to a lecture, most of which one agrees with? The lecture that was delivered by Dr. Julia Ipgrave to me was very comprehensive. It has raised a number of many important issues. A lot of these issues have been dealt with by Julia herself, and there are others which need to be discussed by all of us. Her observation that our schools are both religious and secular is a good one. We should not just look at these schools as either secular or religious. In fact, she has looked at a number of schools and put them on a continuous spectrum, with completely religious school on one hand and completely secular school on the other, and in between you will have all sorts of mixtures. Some are more religious than others, some are more secular than others. This observation is very, very helpful. Quite often it is said that religious schools are divisive, but one can argue in a different way and say secular schools are also divisive, or religious schools are no more divisive than secular schools. Richard Dawkins said he is a believer. Why? Because non-belief is a belief, secularism is a belief. So from that point of view, you can say all schools are religious because the ethos, the philosophy of all schools are based on certain principles, certain doctrines, whether they are founded on belief in God or belief in atheism. Then Julia's categorization of various approaches into doxological, sacramental, and instrumental is very helpful. You have got religious schools, a religious approach, completely religious approach on one hand, completely secular approach on the other, and in between you have got sacramental approach. Now what she has said about the doxological approach is applicable to Muslim schools also. Because in Muslim schools, the concept of God is upheld in the same way. The primacy of God is the primary focus in a Muslim school also. So from that point of view, there will be hardly any difference between a Christian or a Jewish or a Muslim school, even though the actual teachings will be different. But the basic ideas of upholding the names of God is there, and there won't be any difference from that point of view. As regards sacramental, it is something in between. A lot of the schools in this country will be based on that kind of philosophy, where religion will not be completely denied, but at the same time it will not be accepted as a true way of life. Teachers will refrain from making any comments about the falsity or the truth of any religion. They are more accommodating of various faiths. As regards the instrumental approach from religious point of view, that is very, very problematic. And as Julia said in the last sentence of her article, that the conversation between religious people and secular people will not develop into an equitable and fruitful relationship unless the religion that forms a part of them is religiously understood. Even though in the instrumental approach, there will be an attempt to accommodate religion, but religion will be explained in a secular way. It is a sociological phenomenon. Religion is not a very, very important and crucial part of human life, but it's a social phenomenon. If you look at religion in a secular way, then you will not be able to have a meaningful conversation with religious people. And that is a real problem with those who would like to see secular philosophies to be promoted through school curriculum and in many other ways in our society. Now, a number of things I would like to touch upon where quotation has been given from government document. An act of collective worship should be capable of eliciting a response from his students, even though on a particular occasion some of these students may not feel able to actively identify with the act of worship. The sacramental approach combines opportunity, freedom of response. When you come to consider the freedom of response, who has this freedom? The little kids? What sort of freedom have they got to respond in a class? Are they equipped with knowledge to respond? What happens? The responsibility of parents is to nurture them religiously. So they nurture them, they send them to school, then they are exposed to all sorts of ideas. And you expect that because of the freedom that they have been given, to be able to respond to all issues raised in the class. That is not right. It cannot happen. We are not talking about adults here. So the content of the act of worship, the content of our lesson is very, very important. Otherwise, what will happen? What the parents are doing, what church or mosques are doing, they will be counteracted by what goes on in school. Although in the instrumental approach, there is an attempt to promote generalized moral message and the discussion of social issues like violence, abortion, etc. And there's an attempt to develop thinking skills. But all these things are done in a secular setting. That is the problem. That is the problem. Otherwise, there won't be any problem whatsoever. Then one quotation from Michael Hand is here. Students would be actively encouraged in an instrumental setting to question the religious beliefs they bring with them into the classroom. Not so that they are better able to defend or rationalize them, but so that they are genuinely free to adopt whatever position on religious matters they judge to be best supported by the evidence. I do not agree with this approach. Of course, pupils will ask questions, will encourage them to ask questions. There is nothing wrong with that. That is very good. That's a healthy situation. But the thing is, if you question the very foundation of your faith, where the foundation of faith is based on unquestioned assumptions, that is true of all religions, that is true of secularism also. When you start to question the very basic fundamental assumptions of any society, any civilization, then you are in real trouble. So we do not want to encourage these students to question the very foundations of their faith unless we are able to provide them with proper answers. We have inherited the current state of knowledge over thousands of years, and this is a human treasure actually, what we have inherited from past generations. Now we cannot just allow them to be destroyed just by asking questions which will dethrone our children from their cherished faith. Parents won't certainly like that. They do not send their children to school for this thing to happen. What they want, even though they know that it is not the job of a school to make them good Christians or good Muslims or whatever, at least they expect these schools not to destroy the faith that they have been given at home. Children should have the confidence to profess their faith. They should feel proud, and it is in all faith as we understand it, and I will show you from Islamic scriptures that there are plenty of opportunities for us to interact with people of faith or no faith. For example, let us see what the Quran says about it. The Quran says, if thy Lord so willed, he could have made mankind one people. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know each other, not that you may despise each other. And indeed, we have honored the children of Adam. And finally, and more intriguingly, and among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and color. Verily in that are signs for those who know. Every people, we are told in the Quran, has been sent its guide. Differences of beliefs are seen as part of God's plan. God has said that human beings have a common spirituality and morality. If it had been the will of your God, they would have all believed, and all who are on earth. Will you then compel people against their wills to believe? Now, a scholar of Islam has said, commenting on such verses, the primary duty of a Muslim is to convey the truth of Islam to others. Our task is simply to tell others about Islam in our capacity of being witness to all mankind. Others are free to choose whether to accept our message or not. For the Quran lays down that there can be no compulsion in religion. Now, how can Muslims communicate the message of Islam to others if they consider and treat them all as their enemies? Jeremy Hensel Thomas has commented about these verses. He says, a closed, exclusive, puritanical, hostile, and inward-looking version of Islam, which regards all non-Muslims as enemies and infidels and refuses to engage with the rest of humankind, corresponds with no period of greatness in Islam and will bring none. Let us remember the word of the Prophet. All God's creatures are his family, and he is the most beloved of God, who does most good to God's creatures. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, when he was asked, what actions are most excellent, he said, to gladden the heart of a human being, to feed the hungry, to help the afflicted, to lighten the sorrow of the sorrowful, to remove the wrongs of the injured. That person is the most beloved of God, who does most good to God's creature. Now, we discussed the issues that have brought us here together on many occasions, along with our colleagues at the University of Cambridge. Quite some years ago, when Terry McLaughlin was alive, at the Department of Education, there are people like Professor Roy Niblett, Bernadette O'Keefe, and Patrick Walsh, Brenda Watson, and some other Muslim scholars. The seminar which you organized, like we are doing today, concluded and observed the pernicious effect of secularism, which can be felt in our society. And they said, and it's a joint statement by all these people, secularism, interpreted as an explicit rejection of a religious dimension to life, is a disturbing, confusing force, creating doubts about these values, shaking the roots of culture, and leading humanity from certainty to uncertainty, from a sense of truth to a loss of all truth. The temporal world is dissociated from the spiritual world. Hence, the only limited aspects of human personality are expressed, the physical, material, and logical. Secularism itself, however, is not value and belief free. It is rooted in a tentative faith in evolution of a godless causeless, completely non-rational, inert matter, a logical absurdity. Such a conception has many consequences. Secularism generates uncertainty in the name of freedom, while faith in God can give a new strength to the moral fiber of a person's being and enable him or her to resist those forces which lead human beings to selfishness, cruelty, debauchery, dishonesty, and other forms of corruption. This power to resist evil ought to be strengthened, but secularist attitudes can easily weaken it because they underestimate the importance of the interiority of human life and depend too much on externalities. But before we can resist evil, we must discern what is evil. This is an internal act. Hence, the education of the interior is a necessity which the secularist philosophy all too often ignores. As suggested, British society has its roots in long established religious traditions, and this applies both to the majority and minority groups. Nor does the existence of religious variety and doctrinal differences exclude the possibility of formulating a common approach to education. As the previous discussion has shown, there is sufficient agreement to allow a common approach to be articulated. The present dominant secular and materialist approach to education in a state maintained schools ignores this possibility and implies that we ought to accept a non-religious bias in education, which it misleadingly describes as neutrality. So, how much time have I got?
1 minute.
Oh, fine. Right. So I come to the end of my observation anyway. So, the question is it possible for us to speak to the secularists? The answer is yes. It cannot be otherwise. We live in a society where on a daily basis we are interacting with people who are of different religious backgrounds. There are people who are deeply religious, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, and also those who are opposed to religion. We have to speak to everybody. If we can live in the wider society together, why is it not possible for us to live together in a school environment? It is of course possible. So what we should do, we should learn to respect each other, promote respect for each other, even though there are differences. Of course we will try to convey what we believe to be true and let a secularist person have the same opportunity also. And then if we approach the whole of education or other areas of life in this way, then probably we'll be able to live in harmony or peace. Otherwise, it will be all struggles, fight, and it will be worse for everybody, whether they're religious or not. Thank you very much.